Hello and welcome to another edition of What Does the Giraffe Say Media with me, Kathleen Retourne. We're an organisation that aims to connect people in conservation by holding live interviews on social media. Today I am very happy. I am joined by Duncan McNair and he is the CEO for Save the Asian Elephants. So Duncan, I'm going to pass over to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what it was that triggered you to want to protect Asian elephants.
Okay. Hi, Kathleen. Hello, everyone who's listening, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Well, thanks for that introduction. I founded Save the Asian Elephants 7 years ago to the month, actually, in January 2015, shortly after my first trip to India. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I practice as a lawyer in London. But I've had always active interests, particularly in animal welfare and conservation. And I had just done a year's work at the RSPCA, or for the RSPCA, who commissioned me to do a national review on farmed animal welfare standards. I found that very absorbing, and I wanted to do another animal-related project. And I was starting to hear about the horrors for Asian elephants in tourism across Southeast Asia. So I planned a trip to India, which I did in 2014. And I was so horrified and shocked and bereft, really, at what I saw, far worse even than I had anticipated as to the treatment of baby and adult Asian elephants in and about tourism and other commercial abuse. And I was concerned that awareness of the issue was so low. I mean, amongst all sorts of bodies and constituencies of knowledge and opinion, I knock around barristers and judges and so on a lot. Virtually none of them knew the first thing about it. Likewise, all sorts of other people I spoke to. And I felt that the cause of the Asian elephants, very desperate because their numbers are so low and moving now to extinction, was very underrepresented. I spoke to some of the big charities in the UK, and I felt that although they were grappling with the issue, not a lot really was seen to be done. And I felt a really direct approach needed to happen, particularly enormously raising public awareness of the horrors and, of course, offering solutions. And that's really how STAE started. STAE, Save the Asian Elephants. And I gathered around me people of all sorts of moment and importance. Some of them international names who were very ready to come forward and support this. And so that's how STAE was born. And ever since the beginning, all our policies have been predicated on greater public awareness. Absolutely crucial. And I've said, and this will probably resonate with you, Kathleen, and with your listeners, that the single thing above all else that holds out some promise of salvation for not only Asian elephants, but many of these abused endangered species, above everything, is social media. The relentless and thoughtful use of social media. It's not sufficient, but it's absolutely necessary. And without it, in my view, no project of this sort is likely to succeed. And so we've set our hand to relentless social media coverage, and as my team has grown ever larger. And so of course, we had to then turn to what are the policies? What do we stand for? What's wrong that needs to be put right, and how can this be done? And I have several of those. We have several of those on our list of questions. I think you're thinking of putting to me. One really immediate one is this, that here in the UK we still exert global influence in different ways, far less than we used to, and we certainly do with respect to India and some of the Southeast Asian states where the elephants still survive. And yet, of course, we can't change their law, but we are autonomous as far as our own law in the UK, as are other countries with respect to their own laws. And so whilst, of course, we can't go sailing across to India and plant a Union Jack in a nearby hill and declare how they must deal with and treat their animals. Nonetheless, we can and should and must and do in some cases influence in the UK the practices of commercial enterprises who stoke the UK market and of consumers who make who purchase goods and services. And so we thought early on that it was crucial to try not only to raise public awareness, but to link it to political awareness of the political parties, and to address government on the need for new law, and in particular, new law to ban this rampant market in the UK that fosters and encourages brutal treatment of Asian elephants at hundreds and thousands of tourist venues across the Southeast Asia. So in other words, a new law to ban the advertising, promotion or sale of access to brutal venues in the range states where Asian elephants are most hideously treated. And that's what we've pushed and pushed for almost every day. We realized the travel industry had no interest in pursuing this, virtually none, with some notable exceptions. But maybe we'll come on to how the government has responded, the UK government, and we're very, very gratified about it in response to our requests, and dozens and dozens and dozens of meetings we've had with 10 Downing Street and with our Environment Ministry and other ministries to bring this about.
So you touched on it while you were speaking there, and for those of people who are watching that maybe aren't aware of what the situation is and what these elephants are actually going through, can you tell us exactly what it is that are the horrors and why it's so important that it needs to be ended?
Of course. Well, Asian elephants are wild animals. They're not tamed. They're not like dogs or horses who over 10,000 years and more have been domesticated by man. They're not. They're wild animals and indeed highly dangerous. And some 60 years or so ago, the UK tourism industry went through a revolution with package holidays around the world, and that included to Southeast Asia. And elephant tourism very rapidly became enormously popular. Asian elephants were already struggling in numbers through loss of habitat and so on, but now the pressure was on them enormously to drag them, to poach them from the wild in the most brutal way, quickly as possible, to get them into camps where they could be essentially, and are, stabbed and beaten up and isolated, starved, dehydrated. This awful process called pujan, the breaking of the spirits. This is nothing traditional. This is new, and it's driven by commercial considerations. So the sad typical life story of a little Asian elephant is that it is poached, it is stolen from the wild, its mother usually killed in front of it who tries to protect it, and members of its herd likewise. The little elephant, far too young to be separated from its mother, is taken into captivity, isolated, which is a disaster for a highly social being, and then starved and dehydrated, kept awake with enormous noises for weeks and months on end, and then tortured, beaten, stabbed, ripped with iron hooks. I have examples of the weapons that I produced at any number of public meetings. And eventually the little elephant is broken psychologically, physically, mentally, and it will do anything at the fear of being stabbed and beaten up again. It won't recognize its mother anymore. It's completely putty in the hands of those who want to turn it towards rides, which are wholly unnatural for an elephant to give, and playing football and painting and dancing and standing on top of each other. All these things you see almost around every corner when you go to some countries in Southeast Asia where people are earning a buck or a dime or out of the abuse of elephants. It's truly awful. I mentioned the process of pujan, breaking of the spirits, a terrible, terrible thing. It's got nothing to do with religion or Hinduism. It is a repudiation of Hinduism, which is a gentle and peaceful loving and animal loving religion, as are the other religions of Southeast Asia. It's dressed up as religion, but it's purely there for commercial exploitation and money making. It's a tragedy. I've seen elephants suffering the most grievous harm, and they say only about 50% of little elephants survive Pajan. They die on the spot, or they die later of heart attacks and so on. It's a gruesome, I don't even like to call it medieval type practice. It is just so brutal and gruesome and wholly unjustified. And the terrible thing is that elephants, as we all know, are cognitively extraordinarily intelligent. They have an enormous range of emotions that parallel humans. They have great memories, cognitive understanding. They operate in a complex social environment in herds in the wild. And because of this extraordinary intelligence, they don't need to be brutalized in order to be made to do things. They can be trained by what's called positive reinforcement. Now, I don't think that elephants, I and tens, probably hundreds, if not thousands of millions of others, don't think that elephants' purpose in the world is to make a living for the tourist industry or others. It's not. They have a value of their own. They have an autonomous, independent value, in my view, as great as any other species, including ours. And we must remember the suffering that they undergo, and it's so unnecessary, because if they are to be trained, they can be trained patiently, as they have been for centuries in the past, before this last 50 or 60 years, when elephant tourism in this gruesome form really took hold. And that's Pajan. But the sadness is that elephants, with their great memories and so on, they only have to see their handler waving one of these weapons in front of them, even when they're mighty, majestic adults, to be terrified and to jump back. I've seen it happen many times. They are terrified of the so-called bullhook or ankus, which is a fearsome weapon with fierce jabbing spikes and hooks on it that rip through flesh in all the most sensitive places of the elephant's body. They don't need to be brutalized, but when they are, they never forget it, and it's a tragedy, and they live their lives enveloped in fear, which is routinely reinforced on them to make them do what their masters dictate, to make money out of them, and to live the most terrible life, and often a really sad and awful, drawn out death.
Yeah, it's absolutely no existence for them. It's absolutely, they might be alive, but they're not having a life. It's absolutely horrific. You were touching on it earlier before when you were talking about one of your big aims for this new law. Are you finding that there are pushbacks from the tourism industry because they're making money from this and they don't want to stop that?
I'm afraid that's absolutely the case. I want to set the matter in context. The travel industry, let's talk about the UK first, is very, very large indeed, and it's very variegated. And within it, there are some excellent companies in this respect who are really trying to, and are going ethical, and are making good money out of being seen to be green and humane. And we applaud them, and we do so rightly publicly on our social media and our other published output. I cannot say that that is typical of the industry at large. Of course, a large part of the industry does not involve itself with elephant or endangered species holidays, but a lot do in whole or part. And we have certainly found pushback. We've dealt many times with the largest representative trade body of the tourism industry, ABTA, formerly known as the Association of British Travel Agents. And if I can politely say, it's been more than an uphill battle to make them shift. And it's a great shame, because they and others like them could be of enormous influence for the good to change. But if I can tell you, STAE has been very careful to present campaigns that are evidence-based, and we gather our evidence carefully. We often, we in many ways, we double check it and triple check it. But for example, we have now evidence of nearly 1,250 UK-based travel companies promoting what we call UEVs. That's an expression now adopted by our government. UEVs, unethical elephant venues, a very polite way of describing the most brutal of brutal venues. So 1,250 companies promoting hundreds and hundreds of brutal venues in the UK through many thousands of advertisements. There are every year millions of elephant rides. For example, typically a few years ago, 16 million in 1 year was estimated in Thailand alone. The overall is far greater. And when you realize how depleted the numbers of elephants are, you realize how extraordinarily hard they're being worked and worked and worked every day to give rides. And so there are now there are now hundreds of these venues being enthusiastically promoted in the UK by thousands and low thousands of UK companies, and we think we may have just scratched the surface in these statistics.
Yeah.
And so through nearly 3,000 advertisements. And I'm sorry to say that although we've engaged with hundreds of UK travel companies, we also have an enormous schedule of broken promises of change by travel companies. And that's a tragedy. Promises of change that are never happen, or they're very spasmodic and they revert back, or many that just pretend that there's nothing going wrong. You know, even at places where British tourists have been killed by abused elephants that have been pushed beyond their endurance, and they attack. And so we must always remember that elephants, although hideously abused on an epic scale, are also extremely dangerous to humans. They attack and kill. We have hundreds and hundreds of examples of elephants killing tourists.
Yep.
And also inflicting the most horrific injuries on them. I interviewed a young woman, well, she was 20 at the time of the attack, whose sister was killed in front of her, and she and her father also nearly killed by an elephant hideously abused at a venue called Nong Nooch Village Garden in Thailand. And that happened nearly 20 years ago, but now we go back there and find it's exactly the same, in fact, worse than it was then. And still, large numbers of UK companies, well over 100, are marketing that place and encouraging tourists to go there, including ABTA membership. And so that's just one example out of many that we could give you. A second way in which elephants, when they're abused in captivity, are deadly dangerous is that they are highly effective, what's called zoonotic transmitters of deadly airborne viruses. For example, TB and SARS, and we believe, and the evidence is mounting, COVID-19. We know how desperately India has struggled with its problems with COVID-19. The last thing that should be happening is the encouragement of that through thousands of these dank, fetid, awful venues where elephants are held down with wires and chains, beaten and broken. All their systems are compromised so that they break down in every way, and they become highly effective transmitters to humans around them when they sneeze, when they cough, when they spray water of these deadly diseases. It is grossly irresponsible for anyone to market places like this just for a buck, and particularly when they don't give any proper warnings of the dangers that people encounter getting close to captive abused elephants. And sadly, captive and abused are almost synonymous. I'll just interpose a brief point. STAE is not against all elephant tourism, very far from it. In fact, we believe that ethical elephant tourism of the sort that is seen across these nations is possibly the last and best prospect for survival of the Asian elephants. So what I mean by that is elephants being allowed to express themselves freely, observed from a respectful and safe distance, either in reserves or in other ethical sanctuaries where they are not subject to man's constant hand on them, in terms of riding and abusive entertainment of different sorts. India has an enormous amount of land called reserved forest lands, which has no designated purpose at the moment, much of which climatically and in other ways would be perfect for housing elephants if they were liberated from many of these brutal places. Furthermore, there are many venues that could be converted to ethical without disproportionate cost. And it's those sorts of the purpose of our law, if it comes to pass and we're getting closer to it, would be to ensure that the UK travel industry effectively, if it wants to persist in elephant tourism, fine, but that it exerts its commercial and economic pressure on the markets in India and the other 12 range states, all of which do elephant tourism, to change from brutal to ethical.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that would have such if there's no demand for these unethical, then they're going to want to switch to the ethical, because it all comes down to money at the end of the day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we've got a question coming through from Winnie. Hi, Winnie. She was actually the lady that introduced us to each other, so thank you very much. And she's asking, and I'm guessing probably not, but do tour operators, are they honest with their clients and tell them that some events may involve cruelty when they are booking their holiday?
Well, it varies, of course, and we can't tar everyone with the same brush. But sadly, we have vast amounts of evidence. And I mentioned earlier, nearly 3,000 adverts for unethical elephant venues by companies marketing in the UK alone. And of course, it's not a very good strapline to say, and by the way, you may get killed when you get there, or you may contract a deadly virus, or the elephants are hideously abused and beaten up before you're invited to go on their back for a ride, or to watch them, or to do a selfie, or to watch them play football or paint. So the answer is, I'm afraid, there is a huge amount of misinformation. Now, a lot of that could give rise to legal actions and against these companies. But our overall purpose is to see that the market over time, hopefully sooner rather than later, starts to go ethical, that these abusive adverts are dropped, and that they're simply not permitted under pain of penalty. For example, ABTA has guidelines, but the guidelines are completely hopeless, if I can say so, not least because that is said by the very experts who were invited by ABTA to draft the guidelines, but then the guidelines were extremely watered down before they were published by ABTA. They're not good enough. Furthermore, it's quite clear now from our questions to ABTA, there are no means of enforcing these guidelines. There are no means even of monitoring them to see if they work, to see if anyone is actually using them. And there are no penalties whatever or sanctions for breach. Now, that's a free pass for anyone who wants to go about abusive elephant advertising. And, with this ancient, much revered, world revered species, which is now getting very near to its final stand on Earth, this is not satisfactory. Indeed, I barely know anyone outside that end of the travel industry who believes it's acceptable at all. They're generally horrified, and they want proper action, not voluntary, vague guidelines that no one knows where they even are, what they mean, but the compulsion of law, just as we have the compulsion of law very properly for many other, areas of our life, and including animal welfare, quite rightly. And I must say, the arguments so far put up against this are specious in the extreme. I mean, it's money talking,
Yeah.
but they have a stab at various arguments which are completely hopeless. And I mean, for example, that why should the UK bother with a law when there are loads of other countries sending their people to abusive elephant venues? Well, we have a very big part in it. We send vast numbers of people to these places, and we should set a lead, and other countries should follow. And I can talk a lot more about this and about how it can, and I hope will, happen. But arguments of that sort, and it's as absurd as saying, well, all right, well then let's not bother in the UK to have a law for homicide or murder, because there are still people murdering each other abroad. It makes no sense at all, and it's a disgraceful argument, really. We want very much to work with the travel industry. We have tried so hard for years, year after year after year, almost day after day. It's been very difficult, not in all cases, but the great majority. And when we remember, for example, that ABTA represents thousands and thousands of travel companies, and that it tells us its members provide over 80% of package holidays from the UK across the world, you'll understand why they could do so much to help. They could.
And we've got a question coming through from Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Always lovely to see you at the shows. She's asking, are there travel companies that they can start with first to write, email, call, protest? If so, where can they find the contact information? And I guess my question from what she's saying there as well is, would it be better to get to write to the government rather than the industries? What would you say is the more effective way?
Well, Leslie, that's a really, really good question. And had I been 5 years ago, I would have said, write to all the travel companies, and I can give you a long list, and indeed we still can, of all the abusive travel companies. And I'm sorry to put it that way. And by the way, much of their business is entirely proper and ethical. But our concern as Save the Asian Elephants is the well-being of that species. And so many of them are abused at the hands of ruthless tourism. Now we've come forward 5 years, and we've put thousands of hours into trying to deal with the travel industry and made some progress, but it's nowhere near enough. But we have made progress with government and politicians. And I was asked by the relevant minister 2 years ago to provide a draft bill, which I did with a colleague. Since then, the government in May of last year, 2021, announced the Animals Abroad Bill. And this is a great thing if it comes to pass. And the purpose of that, as set out in what's called the Action Plan for Animal Welfare, is indeed the abolition by law of what are euphemistically called low welfare venues, where abroad, where not only elephants, but we're so thrilled all abused tourism species will be outlawed. Now, the precise mechanics we await for the bill, but there's quite a lot of commentary in the Action Plan for Animal Welfare. And we would say now, because the government is busy and it can get distracted, and sometimes something is said that doesn't happen and so on, whilst we're very respectful of their efforts, we think that every public pressure should now be brought to bear on your Member of Parliament and on the relevant government minister. And if you go to STAE's website at STAE.org, you will see specimen letters that we suggest you might want to consider sending, or adapt them as you wish, or write entirely your own letter by email. It's just a cut and paste thing. And it also helps you to identify who your Member of Parliament is and their email address. In terms of the government, the key minister is Lord Goldsmith, the Minister of State at DEFRA, the Environment Ministry. Very good minister. And we hope very much that his voice will prevail in the throng ahead of all the shouting about don't damage our business, or don't, what's it got to do with Britain, and so on, all this sort of stuff. But you might want to have a look at the letters that we've suggested. And the more, the better. It's very important. We've heard MPs tell us many times, listen, fill my post bag with your letters. I want to receive them. I think you're on a great cause. I need more and more support to take it to government and to the top of my party. And so please focus hard on letters of that sort and on getting hold of any politician that comes within range from the UK. And I'd say the same to those listening from abroad. Talk to your legislators and write to them, your policymakers and your legislators. They too can do what we're doing. And we believe we're making real progress. That's not to say, of course, that we give up on the travel industry. Far from it. And you should, for example, when restrictions lift and we're allowed to go on holidays abroad again and so on, challenge your travel agent. Absolutely challenge your travel agent. Do you do holidays featuring captive elephants? And if you do, you should tell them. I object most strongly, and it's up to you whether you say, I turn my back on your company, I'm going elsewhere. That's a matter for consumer choice, and quite legitimately. But certainly all of that. I've got a to-do list for anyone who's really keen to get behind us. We've got plenty of things we'd like you to do, but those are amongst them. And it's a very good question and a very timely one. So we train our focus on politicians and government, as well as the travel industry, and spreading the word to everyone.
So we've got another question coming through from Don Gordon Pearson. Hi, Don. He's based in Montserrat, the same place as me. And he is asking, would it be effective to publicise the names of travel companies that are profiting from these abused animals?
Well, it might be. Of course, STAE isn't a huge organisation and we don't have broad shoulders. And we've had threats of legal action from certain people, which we generally regard as nonsense. But I, as a practicing lawyer, know that it's an expensive and wearing business and very distracting, which is their intention, to threaten us in this way. And indeed, you have to be careful because it's a changing scene. What might be a wonderful venue today is brutal as hell tomorrow, and vice versa. And so you have to be quite careful. What we do on our website is to identify key characteristics by which you can tell whether a sanctuary is genuine or not. And certainly, if any company that you ask, if you're thinking about going on a holiday with them, ask them, do you do elephant rides and elephant interactions with humans? That's a very, very strong indication that you should not go near them. Captive elephants, closely confined, anything like that. Now, we do have a list and we may be publishing it, and it's a shocking list of so many of the big players. Multi-billion-pound companies, as well as quite small corner shops and so on, travel agents and online and so on. And we may do that. It's difficult. And what we're trying really to do is to change the whole framework under which all of them must act for good. We've done a lot of chasing around uphill and down dale with lots of companies. They have never-ending resources to try and argue against what we say, however specious. And it's probably not the best way for us to go. It's better although we do call out companies regularly, we do on our social media. We are trying, you must understand, to form a framework in this country to start with for the entire species. And so that in the future, abusive animal tourism and including elephant tourism is just regarded with the revulsion it deserves in the whole market and in common conversation between people.
And we have another question coming through from Emma Louise Edwards, and she's asking, do you have a report option for people on their holidays to report these places to you and gather up evidence?
Yeah, well, that's another very good question, Emma. Thank you for that. And the answer is yes. We are very keen at STAE to receive your emails of your tourist experiences. Absolutely so. Of course, witness testimony supported by photos and stills and videos is extremely important, and we've built a very large and growing database of this sort of abuse for when inevitably we're told we're making it all up, by those who are making money from it. And so you should certainly do that. Indeed, it's an interesting question, because when we've been asked by government, as we have, to suggest the sort of framework that might operate for a new law, it does involve the possibility of a hotline that anyone can pick up, both online and telephone, to a dedicated unit, as well as to us, to report your experiences. And so, absolutely, it's very important that we hear that, and it's supported by good photographic evidence. Everyone carries a camera or a smartphone or whatever these days, and so it's dead easy to do, and very, very important. That will, we hope, be a feature of law in the future.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. So yeah, if you are seeing these things, then please do categorize it, take pictures, get the evidence, and then send them over, because the more we're aware and the more evidence we have, the more work can be done.
Absolutely.
And for other ways for people to support, what other suggestions would you have if they, so we've got obviously writing to the government and also sending in any images and evidence of abuse. Is there other ways that people can support the work that you're doing?
Yes, certainly. I mean, those are some key ones. But, well, for a start, very simply, sign our online petition. It's the biggest in history of the world for the Asian elephant species. It's soared past 1 million. It's just nudging 1.1 million now. And it was the fastest growing petition in Britain, I think, bar only Remain and Brexit a couple of years ago. It was surging, and it's huge still. And we have aligned petitions totaling another 33 million signatures of support for our policies. And so sign the petition. Also, lots of things. Please come forward and offer new audiences to us. I've done hundreds of public speeches, and not so easy currently, obviously offline, to do that in the current environment with the pandemic. But when the coast is clear, as it were, and properly so, and it's safe, we'll be resuming that. And there is no substitute but for a very full hall of hundreds of people or thousands of people. And so if you know people, for example, I've addressed all the main vet schools in the UK, many of the major universities, professional bodies, churches, temples, all sorts of religious outfits and clubs and associations of all sorts. It's very, very, schools, crucially. These are all very important, and we would love to hear from you through our website and through all the openings that provides, and our social media, of new audiences, and engage in our social media and show your support. And of course, join STAE. Please do. We need volunteers for all sorts of things like IT and PR and social media, and raising awareness and audiences in many different ways. We've done some great events, live events in the past. We did a great one in West London for several hundred schools, where we got thousands and thousands of entries on projects by young children about Asian elephants. We would love to do that again with the right level of support. It may be that the children of today will be the last generation ever to see this magnificent species in the wild. That there may be a few left, gathering dust in the corners of cages and so on, but that's not what we want. And we must work fast and hard and relentlessly to do it. So all those ways, and I'm happy to talk, by the way, to people. You're welcome to publish our phone number. It's on the site. I urge people to look at the site. In fact, we've just dusted it down and redressed it and refreshed it for the new year, and we get a lot of interactions, and those are very, very important to us, and we're so grateful to people who engage with us. I mean, finally, I've got to say, we need money. We do. We take no money. We certainly take no salaries or pay. We often bear our own expenses. We don't have flash offices and car parks and pension funds and first class travel. None of that. None of it. We put our own money in quite often, but we do need help, because we have fixed costs and developing costs, and we do trips sometimes to report back on the horrors. We've done some very successful trips with journalists and with celebrities and they can blast a trumpet across the world about the horrors, and that does cost some money. And whilst we've tried to bear it ourselves, we do need support, and we think we're making a real difference.
And you are making a real difference for sure. I mean, that kind of leads on nicely to my next question and my final question. If you're watching back home and you want to put a question to Duncan, please pop it in the comments section and I will be able to do that for you. I know we've had quite a few going through as we've been talking. Also, loads of support from all around the world. So thank you, everyone, for supporting the work that Duncan and his team are doing. If you're watching this later and you would still like to ask a question, again, please do so. Don't be afraid to put a question in, and either myself or Duncan will respond to you and get back to you on that for you. So you were just saying earlier about the work that you're doing. So I'd love to know what your favorite success story is, Duncan.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think the petition, the petition is one of them. It's huge. And for every person who signed it, and there's 1.1 million, we believe there's 10 or 20 or 30 who will have heard about it. Beyond that, it's very important in raising awareness to back these very ruthless commercial operators into a corner. It's so important. Also, that we've gathered the backing of 100 influencers and organizations, celebrities and others from every walk of life, many of them of international standing, all the main religions of the world, all of them, politicians, sports people, celebrities, professionals, judges, all sorts of people, all the main, pretty much all the main conservation societies, heads of the Royal Veterinary College and so on, and the political parties, all supporting our policies for change, and starting with an immediately new law to ban the advertising or sale of brutal venues. I mean, we were very gratified that only a month ago, STAE, which is small, although it's got powerful people involved, very powerful and effective, was named amongst the 9 best elephant charities in the world. That's out of thousands. And we were very proud, of course, to be named in that number. And we won Animal Heroes of the Year out of over 850 entrants. It sounds very immodest to say this, but I think the reason I mention it is not only because you've asked, but because it does demonstrate now the breadth and the depth of our cause in public consciousness, that people realize it's a desperate and pretty urgent fight, So all of those things we're very gratified about, but our purpose is the elephants. It's not ourselves, it's the and survival of the elephants.
Yeah, so I've put the link to the petition on the bottom of the screen there. So also Stacey has very kindly put the link in the comments section on this post as well. So that's probably easier to click and be able to do that from there. So please do, as he says, click on the link and make it difference. We've got a question coming through from Julia, and she's asking what your long-term plans are for.
Well, I mean, the overall, to catch the essence of what we're about, it's the preservation and protection of Asian elephants as a species. They are incredibly important, Asian elephants, to our own species and all species. They're known as the mega gardeners of the forests for their natural activities in nourishing and sustaining the forests, and in the preservation of these forests that are the lungs of the earth, that engulf the carbon output and suppress it, and that therefore assist in climate change, in resisting climate change, and in developing biodiversity. And for that reason, I'm sure Prince William said that we destroy this species at our own grave peril, and that's so true. So it's the preservation of that species, and that does good for all of us. Of course, we're focusing hard on the areas of greatest abuse, which is tourism, which we can really do something about. And we ask everyone to back the Animals Abroad bill, and to tell your MP we want it soon, and to tell Lord Goldsmith, Zach Goldsmith, very good guy, that we want this now, and his Secretary of State, George Eustace, who did this excellent action plan for animal welfare. We want it now, but tell all the political parties that. We're engaging hard with the devolved administrations to tell them that. So all of those are things that we're engulfed in at the moment and pushing hard for. There are other areas of policy that we're interested in, and those include things like trying to develop an Anglo-Indian ethical elephant sanctuary. These places exist, but one that is adopted by and stands in the name of the two nations would be a wondrous thing at really negligible cost. And also an ideal mahouts centre operating where the mahouts, who are the daily handlers of the elephants, operate on ethical principles of positive enforcement, not brutality, to show everyone involved in elephants that this need not be the way, this gruesome brutality. And we have plans for an exchange of veterinary students and vets between England and India, the UK and India, to their mutual benefit, and we hope ultimately to the benefit, of course, of the elephants. These are all things that form part of the pattern of our activities for the future.
And I think as well, if people are interested in finding out more about this, if you go onto the website, there is a wealth of information that will be able to give that to you. Okay, so I'm going to take one more question and then we'll start to wrap up. We've got a question coming through from Alison Jeremy, and she's asking, are there any other countries that have stepped in to help with this cruelty, and could we learn anything from them?
Well, certainly, and there is good work being done by NGOs, by non-government organizations in many different countries. And I've made it my business with some of my key colleagues in STAE to talk to them, sometimes at a very high level, because we know, and it's obvious from the way we see signatures from around the world to our petition and from polling figures that are enormous, well over 90% in favour, that people of every country of the world are horrified at this abuse when they get to hear of it. And it's a very good point, because we're urging on the UK government that it is purposeful for the UK to act with this ban, because other countries are standing by, ready to follow, particularly when they see this law working. So we've been speaking to various nations of the world, often at a very high level, sometimes countries who have no real traditional culture of animal welfare, even India itself, but there are others like China and Russia. And the people of those countries do not disdain or hate elephants. They don't want them brutalized. They want to see them, as we all do, exhibiting natural behavior in a natural environment. So all of these things, yes, we draw great hope from countries abroad. I mean, the US is full of very good people trying hard to develop change. They're looking to us and to this new law to adopt in their own way, if they see that our government does have the staying power and determination to see this through to new law. It will be a great thing for our country. And a very great thing for the elephants if this comes about, and we expect many other countries will be interested in pursuing it. I've spoken to people in probably 15 different countries now, some of them at a senior level, as I've said. The Minister of Tourism I met in Delhi some time ago. I met the Attorney General to Australia not long ago. People at that sort of level of influence, they're all interested, and they see that it can do nothing but good for their own country to be acting in a green and humane way.
100% agree. I think a lot of people, as you've mentioned throughout the conversation as well, maybe are just not aware of what these elephants have actually gone through just through that selfie or that ride or whatever it is that they're interacting. And if they are aware, then I'm sure there's no one that would be okay with that. So hopefully the more awareness we can do is and we can stop this kind of brutal industry.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Duncan, for coming on. I've absolutely loved having you on the show. We've had a lot of support, a lot of lovely questions and a lot of kind comments as we've been talking. So thank you, everyone back home, for watching as well. If you did like the show, please do give it a like, comment, share. The more people that see it, the more awareness we can raise for STAE, and the more people that can become aware of the work they're doing, and hopefully we can work together to stop this brutal trade. Before we go, Duncan, is there anything that you'd like to say?
Well, I'd like to say, of course, thank you so much for hosting this excellent show, and to all your listeners and questioners. I'm so grateful that you're interested in this topic. The elephants don't have so long. Please find a way to support what we're doing. There are many ways, as you've heard, and we'd be so grateful. I would be delighted to talk to any of you, or my team would. You can email us, you can social media message us, you can ring me if you want. I'm very grateful. Don't hold back. We need help of every kind, and we need awareness to be spread, and we need our government to know, and your MP to know what you're thinking about this. Do you support an Animals Abroad bill that will ban the brutal the advertising of brutal venues, advertising in the UK of brutal venues abroad where elephants suffer the most extreme punishment and torture? That's the message. It's so timely and important now, with the bill on the brink, we hope, of being published.
And the best thing is, as well, you guys have made it super easy. So everything's on the website. You can just do a simple click a link and make it happen. And it's nice and easy. Will take a few minutes and it will make a huge difference for these elephants.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay, thank you again, Duncan, for coming on the show. Thank you again to everyone for watching. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think a lot of people have become a lot more aware of the work that you're doing and the need for the work that you're doing as well. But from me, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.